Good evening and welcome to OTF Connects webinars. Tonight we have a return presentation from Tina Zita. She is tonight going to talk to us about curating in schools. Well, Tina brings a lot of expertise to us, so we're thrilled she has chosen this topic. And if you haven't yet, make sure that you do indeed head over to Tina's Twitter. I went tonight to take a peek, and she actually tweeted out what her desktop looks like right now, a few minutes before presenting. She has had 33,000 tweets, and you know what? They're all high caliber. You're not going to find out what she had for dinner. You're going to see some interesting information. Tina is a self-proclaimed chocoholic, picture book addict, and of course a big-time techie, all the way from Toronto. Please welcome Tina Zita.
I don't know if I can live up to that introduction there, Trish. It's kind of funny that we talked about the tweets because I think it speaks, thanks Laura, I think it speaks really to that piece about curation and how for me Twitter is really that place where I share my professional learning and connect with colleagues. If you want to see what I ate, it's usually over on the Instagram side, so it's always a bit funny that way. So for tonight, we're probably going to change things up. If it's just the three of us, we're going to personalize it, go as kind of go with the flow and take it from there if that's cool. And tonight's one of those topics that I've always been curious in and have been exploring the last few years around really curating for a variety of audiences and what are the tools that we can use to really focus in on curation and how can we even involve students in that process. So we're going to be going back and forth, and at the end we'll try to look at some tools that maybe you're most interested in, if that makes sense. So I think one of the things that came up on Twitter as we were sharing out the little blurb was what really is curation. And I think we always go to that idea of the art curator or the museum curator, and I think it definitely is that, but we are looking at all the different ways we curate, from the cups you put on your wall to the music you put in your playlist, that you're constantly choosing, assembling, and then sharing those in different ways. Oops, getting a little excited. So for tonight, we probably know each other a bit, so we're going to dive a little deeper, especially in regards to curation and what we think about that. We're going to look a little bit about the what and the why, and maybe we can chat a little bit about where we see the connections to the global competencies, as well as the Council for Teaching English's English, their 21st century definition, their definition of 21st century literacies. Sorry, that got jumbled up. We want to look at that toolbox and then add some tools to our toolbox. We probably even, as a group tonight, can think about a curated collection that we want to put together. And the next steps for taking it back to your practice. So, you guys already know about me, so maybe I'll try 3 different facts. And it feels weird telling people crazy facts. So I think the top picture is actually me hanging out with my parents in PI. They decided to bail on us here in Ontario and move to PI, which would be terrible except for FaceTime, and I have a cool summer destination now to go to. Crazy how much beach there is and how calm and completely different pace of life than here in the city. I actually started my career in primary, so I love getting a chance to go hang out with little friends, and I'm probably a wannabe photographer, always trying to learn new things. So that was a shot heading back from a road trip in PI one night last summer. And the colors in PI just seem amazingly better than when you're working in the spring. So, maybe we can do 3 facts about yourself. Does that sound okay, folks? Do we want to still use the chat box? Maybe give us a smiley face if you prefer the chat still. We could probably use a different format if There's just the 3 of us, 4 of us, 5 of us. Okay, so we so we still like the text box. Okay, so tell us 3 facts about you. We won't do 2 truths and a lie. We'll just keep it to 3 facts. And just drop it in the chat box. That's the problem about 3 facts. It takes a little longer to type in. Hope everybody's had an awesome day. This weather is amazing. Oh my goodness, Melanie. That is crazy. Now, I've never been hit in the face with a golf club before. That sounds intense. I do seem to have a target on my face when it comes to any kind of sporting event. So volleyball, soccer, it all hits my head. But golf club has not happened. Ouch. A dog named Bruce. Very cool. What kind of dog? Laura, always awesome to hang out. Laura, I have to agree. Hearing your voice does sound completely, it's so hard to get used to, and I still even struggle with the video, because with video I just got into the habit of not watching it back, because if I watch it back I just keep re-recording. I don't think I've never been to out west, so I definitely have to check out Alberta. And dinosaurs. Left-handed, right-brained. Congrats, Trish. That's exciting. Bichon Poodle. Very cool, Melanie. A pie in the face. Oh. Wow, K to 6 in 1 year. That sounds like quite a year. Jan, sorry to hear about the vertigo. Colleagues have that. It sounds so hard to tackle. All right, so we'll stick to the text for our chats tonight. I don't mind chatting that way at all. So thanks, guys. Cool to learn a bit more about you tonight. And thanks for joining in. We're going to skip this part because we just did that. But maybe we could do this. So I think we always think of curation as something a bit intense, but sometimes we're already doing it. So have you done any of these 3? Are you a Pinterest fan? Do you use Twitter moments? Or do you have a Spotify or iTunes playlist? All right. Spotify, Melanie. I'm an iTunes and Apple Music fan, so I have to figure out how to get into Spotify too. Yes, yes, and yes, Trish, to all 3? That's awesome. I think Pinterest to me is always one of those interesting social media platforms. I think for me, I'll sit down with it for a few hours and really start pinning different pieces, but also collecting examples from classrooms, especially when I'm teaching additional qualification courses. Pinterest just has so many ways to visually represent the application side of what we're chatting about. But I was really impressed, and I don't know if anybody's checked it out already, the Pinterest fans, but Pinterest now has a collection option within boards, and you can reorganize your pins. So for me, that's a huge piece when we're looking at curation, that we're able to organize and group it in different formats. Trish, I love that you're using it as a group, because I think that's awesome too, right? That possibility of collectively curating. Oh, Jan. Yeah, Twitter has something new called Twitter Moments. So they actually have two things. They have threads, so your threads can be kind of threaded conversations so people can see that it's more than one part. But then the moments means you can kind of put those collections together. So we'll look at some of those tonight just to give you a glimpse. But a fun way of kind of quickly curating from different places. Melanie, there's definitely places where Twitter isn't conducive because it's hard to be succinct. I think the 280 characters now over the 140 definitely makes it a bit easier, and the threaded conversations. But yeah, it can be hard to capture your thoughts clearly. And my typos, man, that bothers me every time. But I think with one of the things I like about Twitter Moments is that we can curate examples from Twitter, but you don't need to be on Twitter to see them. So it's even a cool way of collecting some of the tweets from different teachers in a school, or collecting tweets like for our last session when we did the sketchnoting session, being able to curate those comments that people made and put them into one link that we could share. So huge that way. I didn't really ever think of the Apple Music or Spotify as curation until I was wandering the other day, and just even thinking about that difference between me being able to make my own playlists as well as tapping into playlists that artists have curated or that are curated around a theme or a music style, and just how many different ways those same songs can be repackaged and recontextualized. Yeah, Melanie, that's a huge point, right? And now they're understanding our interests and creating playlists for us. So just like you have on Spotify, Apple Music will give me new music that they think I'll like based on what I've added to my Apple Music library. And how crazy is that to even think of those connections? Oh, Laura, that's amazing. The playlist of their lives. I've seen it too for story characters, right? When you're looking at novels, of getting kids to look at playlists that they think would match their characters that they're exploring. And just so many possibilities that we don't always see that as curation, but within that too, we have those our YouTube playlists, right? Every time we create a YouTube playlist, we're curating. So even without knowing it, we've been curating all along, which is kind of cool. All right, so when you hear curation, what words come to mind? You can drop them right on the page or put them into the chat box, whatever works for you. Oh, I love that, the best of. Such a cool way of saying it. The organization is definitely there, that selection. Uniqueness is a cool word too. Because I think that's part of it, isn't it? That we each will curate a little differently. And then everybody's response to our curation can be different. Downsizing. I think that's huge too. It's not just a collection of everything that's out there, right? It's really that purposeful selection. I went to Paris over March break, and I was really perturbed with the Louvre. It's a beautiful place, beautiful artwork. I feel bad mouthing it, but I was joking with some friends that they should curate better because there's just so much there. And then I had to laugh as we were on the boat tour, and they said that what's on display is only a tenth of what's in the whole collection. So for them, that was downsizing. But definitely when you have that, when there's so much information out there, that being able to tap into nuggets of information is huge. I love the piece about student exemplars, because that's the one thing as we were creating the presentation for tonight that kept coming to mind was the connections between curation and our conversations around pedagogical documentation. And what are those parallels between curating our best work? Right? Even when we talk about a digital portfolio, are we engaging students in that active curation? A collection that has meaning. So cool. Yeah, so many different ways that we're really tapping into it. And I think that's the thing with curation too, right? We don't just want to curate, especially when we're curating resources for students, we don't want to curate just one type of resource. We want to curate that collection, whether it's images, video, and audio that help convey a message. And that's the cool part about a lot of the tools we have available to us today, that really students and our learners can be curating and then sharing those collections with their audiences. All right, you guys rock. So let's go on and get started into the conversation. I thought before we get into the tools, maybe we could chat a little bit more about curation, and we can chat and look at those ministry documents with the global competencies, and then the definition of 21st century literacy, and see where we see those connections, and bring out some of those ideas of where we think those benefits are. I think a lot of it will overlap with what you guys just came up surfaced about curation, and we'll see where we see that overlap. I'm just going to make sure I have my notes so Tricia, I can be on topic with the links that I had in there. I love this quote. So there's a great curator out there. I don't know if you guys follow her, and I didn't put it in the links. Go figure. Her name's Brain Pickings. Does anybody follow her tweets or her blog posts? And I find, to me, she's kind of the quintessential, I can't say it, curator out there. So I follow a lot of her work, and it's amazing. Brain Pickings. I just put the link right to her blog, but to be honest, I follow her on Twitter. Let me see if I can find her Twitter handle. I think it's @BrainPickings. So it's actually a group, I believe, that does it, but she started the foundation, and she just brings the craziest stuff together. And that's what I love about it. It's I never would have put together some of the things that she curates. So she'll bring in something from C.S. Lewis with, oh, thanks, Trish. Something from C.S. Lewis with a past scientist. And just always makes my brain kind of explode. So she had this great quote in one of her blog posts around curation from, I had to laugh, she said, somebody before curation was even a phrase or a term. And I loved that idea, or the illustration that kind of comes to mind through the quote, that you really have with curation this chance to collect all of these great things that others have done, but you're kind of weaving your own thread to make them something new. And there's a great TED Talk by Mark Ronson that he talks about remixing, and how with remixing you're really taking what someone else has started, but you're giving it your own flavor. And I definitely think curation has that. But more so with curation, I think it gives you a chance to really provoke learning through a different way or a different lens. And I thought of two different art gallery experiences I've had in the last little while. But the one that happened most recently, I went to the McMichael Gallery over the Christmas break with some friends. And we were walking through, and you see this standard artwork from the group of 7. And you guys probably, or maybe, have had this experience before, but I'm walking through, it's the mountains, it's the landscapes, and we turned a corner and we saw this portrait. And it just hit me, because I think it's crazy how we can get that one idea or that one frame of who somebody is. I had the same thing in Paris when we were looking at some of the work by Picasso and Kandinsky in the Pompidou. And as you're going through, the artwork just challenges you, just by the pure fact of being put beside or alongside another piece of art. So that simple arrangement makes you reconsider your concept of what that artist has done or what that period was about. We had another experience in the AGO with traditional art from the Middle Ages, and you know, the paintings from the Middle Ages were very similar, and you see portrait, 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 and I turned this corner and it just hit me as the picture didn't seem to make sense. So you stood there for a few minutes grappling with why were those two ideas brought together. So it was just, when I think of curation, I always go back to that experience. How can I create a collection that pushes and extends the viewer's understanding? How can I create a collection that maybe provokes a conversation? How can I create a collection, curate a collection that really has people reconsidering what their definitions are or coming to new understandings? Have you guys ever had an experience like that? Am I the only one? Is it weird? Maybe I'm just the only one. That's okay. So I think we want to keep that in mind as we look at why we curate and some of the different ways we curate. So one of the things that we will drop into the chat box is a link to one resource where we tried to do that in Peel. It's just an iBook that we created around math strategies, high-yield strategies in math. And we did try in a variety of ways to really look at how we could create those provocations. So something like looking at learning environments and putting both a collection of resources around the social feeling of our learning environment alongside with that physical space, because often our brains go to that physical space. So how could we create that curated collection that then provoked colleagues to think a little deeper? So thanks, Trish, for dropping that in. So when we think about why curate, there's lots of different resources out there, but one of my favorite videos that Trish will probably put in the chat box in a minute is from Brain Pickings and some of her favorite friends. And it's on Vimeo. It's a few years old now, but I think it still really speaks to the power of curation and the many reasons why we do it. So we're going to just chat about some of the highlights, but I wanted to make sure you guys had the full video if you want to check it out later. So it's 4 or 5 minutes, but a great clip around the why of curation. So it was interesting as they chatted about curation, because they talked about a couple different pieces. And one of the things that kept coming to mind, the Brain Pickings lady had a great point where she said we are stuck in this new sification time with the internet. And it's kind of funny because 5 years later, I don't think it's changed. But she talked about the fact that we often just take the top hits that we find in Google, and how often our information is limited to whatever is newest on the top of the list. And how do we combat that? How do we really dive a little deeper and are more meaningful about that exploration? And so as the individuals or the expert curators out there, I guess you could say, were chatting about curation, there was a couple things that they mentioned. So one of the things they mentioned was that idea that curation really allows us to show those connections. And I love this scene in the video where they talk about rabbit holes and how the internet's one of those wonderful spaces where you take that one, you click on that one link that leads to another link that leads to another link, and suddenly you've ended up down this rabbit hole of information. And that may have happened to me once or twice. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. But how do we help in our curations to surface some of those little odd connections, I guess we could say. How do we build that network, or like we saw in the quote, weave that thread through the items that may seem random? That is true, Laura. It is definitely a time vampire. But I think that's the beauty of curation, right? Sometimes with curation, we're allowing kids to see, and I say kids, but I think learners of all ages, to benefit from our weird rabbit hole experiences, right? How can we learn from each other and from those experiences of exploring so that we could see those different connections? Because I think it's interesting to see how we each have different pathways that we take, even with the same links on the same page. I think bookmarks are a form of curation. We're definitely going to see something like Google Keep. I think it's how we put those bookmarks together and share them later. And I can't believe I didn't put it as one of the links. But when I first started curating a few years ago, there was a website that I used a lot to curate, and it's called Digo. I'm going to put that in the chat box. And Digo is exactly that. It is a bookmarking tool. So what I loved about Digo was that I could bookmark my favorite sites, and then I could repackage those sites and my annotations for different purposes. So I may have 50 sites in my Digo library, but then I could take 10 of them and share them with a group of educators because we're looking at literacy. Delicious. I haven't used Delicious in a while, and I find I haven't gone to Digo as much either, just because they're not as visual. And I don't know if it's just a phase I'm going through, or if it's just a shift that we've seen in the last few years to going to something a bit more visual based. I'll show you guys Wakelet later if you're interested. So Wakelet is the Storify alternative because Storify is closing today. Good that we remembered that. I'm going to lose all my Storifys tonight. So Storify kind of changed the game for me a bit just because I could see the visual links and allowed me to play with that a bit more. But I like Digo and Delicious just because they did let you curate more on an ongoing fashion instead of that one-time event. It's an interesting, something that I need to explore more of. I think maybe Storify, and maybe I moved to Storify and some of those tools because they did allow you to annotate in between. So where Digo and Delicious allowed you to bookmark and then put your collections together, being able to annotate and put that context in, put that reflection that comes with the resource, I think that's a huge piece of curation. And some tools allow us to do more of that quick piece, like with Pinterest, with a quick reflection, and some allow us to really set that story up in our collection. And I think it's the same as when we look at those exhibits in art galleries, right? Sometimes it's just a collection that's there over time, and then sometimes it's those special exhibits which have special features that allow us to dive a little deeper. Yeah, that's it. Isn't it true though, Melanie? We forget why we're saving things. I'm terrible for that. In my notes I have a long list of links that I dropped in. Not sure why I did it. So I think that's where tools like Google Keep are huge because they can really, just as a Chrome extension, quickly allow us to type in that entrance as we go along. And I think there was another bookmarking tool or a Chrome extension called Candy. Google Keep was just so good that I didn't end up moving to it as much. So I think the other thing that I really didn't think about till we were doing a session for the teacher librarians was the reasons that we curate, and that we curate for different people. And based on who we curate for, we probably use different tools. So I think when I think about who we can curate for, as we were chatting, we really thought of 3 people. Like I can curate for myself, just so I can keep track and stay organized. so that I can remember those little rabbit holes and threads that I want to design. I can curate for others, and I think for us as educators, even curating a collection that we want to provoke students with or provoke colleagues with, I think that's another way that we curate. But then I think we curate together, and like you said, Trish, that idea of having a common Pinterest board that we're looking at, or collectively even creating a document of those links that we want to explore. So I thought I'd share just a couple examples that we could peruse and maybe talk about how we're curating in those different areas. So for curating for ourselves, I find I have a couple different tools that I use. I've been really enjoying Twitter Moments lately. So Twitter Moments, it just really changed the game for me, just because I often found on Twitter I would favorite or I would try to get pocket. So I had these weird if-then statements that if this then that statements. So I would put all my favorites, but then you're trying to search through. So with Moments, anytime you're on Twitter, you can just hit the button, and we can go through it in a few minutes if you like. And I can add it to collections. So for example, when I'm seeing great ideas, just because I want to learn more about Indigenous learning strategies, and there's just so many amazing people that I follow that have great ideas that I want to remember, I have a moment where I add those ideas right now so that I don't lose them. But then I can also differentiate between when I publish my moments and when they're just for me. So something like that I keep just for me, and then I have another Twitter moment for the primary basic course that I'm working with, or the junior basic course, where I'm able to take classroom examples and publish that moment so that they get a glimpse into what colleagues are doing. And just a chance for me to highlight and share and put that collection together of what other individuals are saying instead of just me. So it's been a tool that has been a more recent tool that I've been using just for curating for myself, and then sometimes moving into sharing with others. I think another one that I started off with a lot more was Flipboard. Does anybody use the Flipboard app? Maybe you can just give me a thumbs up or a happy face in the, oh, cool, Laura. So I loved Flipboard when I first got started just because all of the Twitterverse was not visual. And I just love the fact that on Flipboard I could see visually what was happening. Oh, cool. That's awesome, Laura. So I think I love that I can take different pieces and drop them into magazines. Now you can publish your magazines. So you can probably see in Flipboard now that, oh, sorry, Jen. So with Flipboard, the magazine part is kind of huge, and I also can log in online now, so you're not just dependent on the app. I don't know why it wouldn't let you in on that school. That's an interesting bit. The only thing I can think of, we have that with Adobe Spark too, where our Google accounts, sometimes our board Google accounts, don't let us authenticate. So sometimes we have to use the traditional email sign up. Sounds weird, but I doubt that would be what blocked you. Laura, have you tried the book snaps too? That may be a cool way to get them into the new novel study. I'll email you that link. We just made a little video clip about it this week because it could be a cool way to share those moments as well. Do you guys have favorite tools that you use to curate for yourself? Google Keep is one that I've been trying as well, just because it has the Chrome extension. So that part has made it really easy as I'm navigating the internet to just be able to click on that button and it will automatically pull the web address for me. But I do have that option to annotate. Google has a Chrome extension as well, which is nice and handy. But I do find that a lot of those rabbit hole moments or the internet vampire, as you guys mentioned, happen on Twitter for me. I feel that's where I kind of fall down that hole and need to be pulled back. Instagram is doing that for me lately too. And Instagram adding collections has been a huge piece for curating for myself as well. All right, so a lot of them there, Laura. I find that's the hard part with curation, right? I was using a lot of those note-taking apps, but the fact of taking that link and then having to go somewhere else can never keep it up with it. I couldn't stay consistent. So that was one of the struggles with that for sure. All right, well, we want to look at some tools. So keep chatting and keep typing away. Same wavelengths there, Laura, right? I think looking at the curating for others, some of those tools like Flipboard and Twitter Moments, I think it's interesting because as much as I use them for myself, they often end up being tools I use for curating for others. The two main ones that are huge for me, TAC used to be one that I used all the time, but they went down. So I went to Adobe Spark. I love Adobe Spark just because it's so clean. And I'm able to take those videos and put that real annotation in. So Laura knows this already. Sorry, Laura. But I curate on a monthly basis, just a roundup for my schools. And this year we've been focusing in on the global competencies and looking at how we could frame those curated collections each month around that. So bringing in the story, bringing in a resource, and keeping it very visual. But we've even used them to curate a quick collection for a professional learning session. We're curating different app links that we could share out. So it's been an interesting tool, and I think for me it really allows me to do that reflection piece we talked about, where we can share the context or set the context and really elaborate on it. I think the other tool that I've loved, because for a long time I used Storify. I don't know if anybody used Storify. It was kind of the go-to curation tool. It's how people would summarize Twitter chats, and all of that jazz. And in January, they sent us all a message that said they were closing shop, which made me panic because every Sunday I get up and I look through our Peel 21st hashtag and I try to curate examples or ideas from across the board into one little story. And it's kind of selfish. I love doing it just because it's cool to see all of the things I missed through the week. But also to document that growth. When I go back to that first curated collection we had, we were just excited people were sharing on Twitter. So to be able to go back over time and see that curated collection now is kind of amazing. And now they're closing shop literally today. So this is kind of ironic. So when that happened, I had slight heart palpitations. I didn't know what to use. We did try Twitter Moments. It wasn't really working. So Wakelet actually contacted us, a bunch of us on Twitter, and it has been amazing. And what I love about Wakelet is it's such an awesome tool to curate what we're doing in social media platforms. So I'm able to tap into those tweets. I'm able to bring in online links. It creates different visualizations. So the one you're going to see is kind of shows the pictures that go with the links, but I can also create a curated grid. I can create more of a list option. So one time we created a collection of digital interactive art examples. And exploring a bit like that. Laura, that's the cool piece about tools like Wakelet. And I'm kind of freaking out right now because I forgot to do it. But Wakelet actually stepped up and is allowing us to export our Storifys over into Wakelet. I just have like 350, so I did 2 rounds and I forgot to go back. the site was down this weekend. So I really appreciated how Wakelet gave us the opportunity to export those moments so that we don't lose that history, because that is such a huge piece, right? Being able to look back and see that those changes over time. But yeah, it is one of the hard parts with online tools. I felt that with TAC last year. TAC was similar to Adobe Spark, a great tool to use with kids because they didn't necessarily have to sign up, and if they did, they could use their Instagram feed, or they could use your Google account, so lots of ways. But then they just emailed us one day and said they're not happening anymore, and we could download our TACs as PDFs, which was a bummer because they're not as interactive or as useful anymore. And that growth is kind of huge. So that really leads us to that last piece. When I was thinking of tools we use to curate together, Trish, I love that you brought up Pinterest because I think it's such an important tool. And there's so many different tools we use to curate together. But I've even just been tapping into a lot of those Google tools. So for one of our AQ courses this week, we've been looking at creating a digital resource roundup, and being able to, all 15 of us, be in one document and sharing our favorite tools just gives us a chance to really curate together. We've used other tools like Listly with our library crew to look at creating collective book lists or even documenting collectively. But I think, to your point, Laura, with the Google tools, we know that they'll be around for a bit longer, and there's also ways to kind of export them out of that space. So if things change, we can document and keep that history and that growth over time. I mentioned a lot there. So maybe if you have a question, if you have a comment, is there a tool there that you've seen, and do you use some other tools? What's kind of coming to mind for you right now? Awesome, Melanie. If I'm good for anything, it's that they're tapping into that toolbox. I love adding different tools and seeing how we can tap into them as we're sharing. Laura, I'm going to give you guys a little 6 tools we could use kind of intro, and then as a group we can pick the 2 or 3 that we want to take a closer look at, and we can use to create a curated collection. So we'll make Adobe Spark one of those for sure. All right, so before we get into the tools, awesome, Laura, let's look a little bit at those connections. So this quote is interesting. I'm reading a book by Sylvia Tolosano, who is Languages on Instagram, on Twitter, and she also has a great blog where she curates. Perfect timing. So she had this great quote from a colleague, and it was interesting because I think it leads into our next reflection that we want to do. And I never thought of that digital citizenship lens as being something that they curate. But really, this quote made me start thinking about digital citizenship and that digital portfolio and that assessment journey, and how much of that process is really curation. It's helping kids understand the difference between what's for me and what's for others. What do I want to keep for my learning journey? What do I want to share with others about my learning journey? And then how is that really helping us see that assessment piece? So what we want to do is just take a few minutes. Now, Trisha's going to drop in a couple links in the chat box. So there is a link to the 21st Century Competencies. We often talk about the Global Competencies document that the ministry published. It's a great document, but it's very comprehensive. So the ministry team actually put together just a list of look-fors under each of those. So if you haven't seen it, that's the link that Trish just dropped in. And then it hit me It always comes at the most interesting times. The monograph the ministry published a few years ago around literacy in a connected world, they actually talk about 3 ways that we can use technology in our program. And the first one is really accessing information and curating information. So it just really puts it in context in that framework of creating, connecting, and then curating and accessing information, which I think was an interesting lens for the way we look at technology. And then as I was looking around, I was reminded of the 21st century definition of 21st century literacies from the National Council of Teaching English. Hopefully I got that right, Laura. And as I was reading those, I was wondering, where do we see curation fitting into those competencies and those lenses? So we'll just give you a minute or two as you're perusing. Maybe you already know them really well, or maybe there's an idea that's already popping to mind. Where do you think curation fits in that global competencies or new literacies definition discussion? You guys can just drop it in the chat box when you're ready. Yeah, Laura, that's the interesting part. When I was thinking of curation, I definitely thought of that critical thinking piece, and coming back to brain picking's piece about new mystification and getting kids to think past the top hits and thinking about what best represents what they're exploring. Even just that piece of being able to choose differing voices and different point of views and bringing them together. And that's another great point about collaboration. It's not where my brain went first, but definitely that fact that as a collective, we're collectively constructing understanding, collectively constructing a resource bank, and how that's as much collaboration as that discussion across the table. Jen, that's a great point about designing and sharing information for global communities. What came to mind is our work around the global goals in a lot of our schools, and seeing how does curation help us tell those stories as well. That manage, analyze, and synthesize multiple streams of simultaneous information is almost exactly what we're talking about with the definition, isn't it? You see a lot of those words pop up in our curation definition as well. And that critique and analyze. Be cool for kids to curate those opposing views, or think about how they could layer resources in such a way that we're challenging them. Finding patterns is key, isn't it? Yeah, they're in that, those were the ones from the National Council of Teaching English, Dan. It's interesting, to see how they've moved away from just things that we see in a traditional text format. That when we look at managing, analyzing, and synthesizing, we can do that in with so many different text forms. Definitely that critical thinking and why something should be added. Great thoughts, folks. Loving it. Don't want to cut you off there, Jen. I see you're typing. I wonder if it does fit into that learning to learn and that self-directed learning as well. That part of being able to curate is we can look at those different moments of learning over time. Just coming back to the quote we saw on the last page. but also that metacognitive piece, I think, about self-directed learning. I wonder if it fits into our communication conversation as well, about learning to communicate in a variety of formats. I think sometimes we often think students have to create from scratch, but I think a curated collection is a created collection as well. Or that's a huge piece about making meaning, and how that curation is kind of that making meaning and making sense, isn't it? So folks, I just wanted to, sorry Jan and Laura, I know you're going to keep oh, Jen, that sounds cool. I love that idea. And I'm glad you, I'm not crazy, Melanie. That's cool. Sometimes when you talk through these ideas, it's interesting to see that back and forth. I'm being challenged even tonight as we're chatting it through. Jen, and I think of things like the Google Arts and Culture. I don't know if you were in the session where we chatted about that, where they have all the artifacts from different, let me see if I can get it here for you, from different early societies. And being able to choose the collection that you think kind of sparks that conversation. It's definitely an interesting lens to bring to that exploration. See if I can find the link really quick for you. It's never fast when you're trying to show people. So this was a collection we put together just of different artifacts of we do different artifacts just as a provocation to get us started. But the cool part with Google Arts and Culture is anybody with a Google account can create their own collection. And then they have that chance to create an annotated beginning to that collection. All right. Google does have a lot. I'm a diehard Apple fan, but I do love especially some of those alternative tools. So Google Arts and Culture, they just created a new tool called Google Tour Builder where you can create your own Google expeditions. Kids can create their own Google expeditions. So pulling from Street View or your own 360 images or photospheres, students could be creating a curated collection of the best places in their community. You can curate a list of it. That's it. But how amazing is that to create that tour of your community? And our tours are curated lists, aren't they? When you look at every travel brochure or travel book, it's someone's belief of what the best highlights are. Curation is everywhere, even if we don't call it that. Okay, so just, oh, cool, Laura, that would be cool. You guys are just, love all of the ideas. So we wanted to make sure we took a bit of time to build our toolbox. So what I thought is I'll just quickly describe, I have 6 different tools here. We won't look at the Google Suite just because I figure you guys probably know that tool pretty well and it won't work as well for my iPad. And with the iPad I can see the chat and we can look at the tool together. So I have 6 tools that I thought I'd do a little elevator pitch for. And then I thought maybe we can pick 2. If we have enough time, we can do 3. And maybe we can choose a topic that we want to curate together and just work through it since we're a smaller group tonight. So here are the tools that I thought I'd give you a quick little elevator pitch for. And somebody can keep me accountable so I don't take too long. So some of them we've talked about already. So with Twitter moments, if you guys are on Twitter, which I think most of us are, we mentioned, in Twitter, we can actually just take the tweets we're working on right when we see the tweet, and we can drop it into moments that we have, whether they're moments you've already created, or you can even create a new moment on the fly. So if you want to, we could take a quick look at Twitter moments. It wouldn't take us long to just give you a sense of what that looks like. If you guys want to go back over Flipboard, but I know if it's blocked for you, Jan, I guess it wouldn't be that exciting. And it seems like some folks have used that tool already. But just being able to add your own hashtags that you follow, your own topics that you're interested in, and then creating the magazines, because the magazines are really the coolest part for us to document that piece over time and keep those, curate those great moments. And I love that the Flipboard, like Pinterest, gives you the opportunity to write your own reflection of why you want to add that to your curated collection. Now I did put it on here, but if you do have a lot of diehard Pinterest fans and you haven't checked out the new option to create collections within your boards, we could look at that too, just as an option. Google Keep, I love Google Keep for many reasons. And this is where I love all the odd Google tools. But Google Keep's an awesome tool just because I love the fact that it's an app. So if I'm on my device, I can grab that picture, or I can grab even a dictation if we were having a chat, just having somebody speak it in. But then the Chrome extension just allows me to capture information in another way. And they all sync within my account, which is just amazingness. So if you're looking for something that would sync between devices, Google Keep is awesome, and it's also not dependent on something like Twitter or social media, so it's kind of cool that way. I think also a great tool if you're looking for a tool that students could use as they're researching and really getting them into that note-taking strategy and curating some of those best pieces. The other hidden secret about Google Keep is that you can then take your notes from Google Keep and put them straight into a slide deck or a Google Doc. So that really changes the game, because now we're able to curate for ourselves, but then we can also move them into a collection that we want to share with others. So it kind of moves us from that curating for ourselves to curating to others, which is super cool. Adobe Spark Page, if there's one tool that people check out, to me it's Adobe Spark Page, just because it's so clean. Such an awesome tool if you haven't checked it out. A really great tool for students to use, for us to use as teachers, for leaders to use. There's just so many uses of it, even if you wanted to use it with family. And they have some really cool options for visualization within the collection that just make it really cool to set up that story. Kind of like we were talking about with the special exhibits at the art gallery, where you can really set the stage with the text or the links that you put in, and lots of possibilities for really alternating how the information is shared. And then Wakelet, like I said, is one of my favorites. So if you're looking through a lot of social media pieces, we've even used Storify in the past, but Wakelet would work for exploring media ads with students. So how could we go find the different ways that Coca-Cola is advertising across the world, and how you can see those different audiences they're advertising towards, and how that curated collection can make us think. We've done it also with different types of ads for students, so that they can see how the same company can create a print ad and then create a video ad. Or when you look at Xbox, advertising to parents versus advertising to teens versus advertising to kids. And again, being able to bring those pieces really quickly together. And then the Google Suite, of course. So the hard question is, out of all of those tools, in the next 15, 20 minutes, what's a tool that you would love to see most? Maybe we can do our top 3. So what is your top 3 from that list that you would want to see in more detail? Or something else I didn't mention in this 6, but that maybe I mentioned earlier. Melanie, you're right on it. Spark, Keep, and Wakelet. Okay, so Spark and Wakelet are definitely on the list. Jan, you're the tiebreaker. I guess Trish is. Trish, do you have an? Okay. How about we start with Spark and Wakelet? And then Trish, you get to be the tiebreaker for the third one if we have time. I always overestimate, so probably better to go right into Spark and we'll go right into Spark and that. So I'm just going to switch over to my iPad. It will just take me a second here. So how about we start with Spark? It's a bit, or maybe we'll start with Wakelet because it's a bit simpler, and then we'll move into Spark because it has more fancy tools, if that sounds okay. So Wakelet's a website. There is also an app that makes it a bit easier on your phone, but I traditionally or mostly use it online. And if you have used Storify in the past, it's very similar. So that's one of the cool pieces. So it allows you to take both websites or links as well as look through tweets, through hashtags, through users, and put those collections together. Sorry, folks, just a technical glitch here. Hopefully it will be up in a second. There we go. My device just decided to pop up all these windows. Sorry, folks. It was going too smoothly. Okay, so Flipboard somewhere else we can definitely look at Keep. Thanks for being the tiebreaker, Trish. The hard job, the big responsibilities. All right. All right. Tools, application sharing. Start sharing. Trish, I told you it was going too smoothly, right? I had that nervous feeling. But no worries. We came all around. So you guys can see my screen? Awesome. Okay. So maybe I'll just do Keep really quickly so that you get a quick overview, and then we'll spend more time with Wakelet and Spark. So Keep is a free app, Android or Apple, which is awesome. And you just have this whole collection of your notes that you take over time. So even a great app for documenting. But on the bottom there, you can see how you can take your different notes. So I can click on my image and even choose an image. So if I had my sketch notes maybe that I want to have all in one area, it will come in, and then I can add a title. And as I go through, one of the cool things, coming to your point, Laura, earlier, is I don't need to put it into different notebooks, which sometimes takes more time, especially when we're trying to curate. I can color code them really quickly if I want, or I can put labels in. So as I'm putting in different tools, I can tag it with different labels. So the labels are cool because when I'm done, I can see my note there, and in the corner, I'm able to go back through my labels and search, but I can also just use my search tool. So similar to Delicious or some of those tools, we're able to really just search for anything so that I can find that object later on. Does that kind of make sense? Like I said, for curation purposes, the Chrome extension is huge because when I'm on a website, I'll see if I can find one here while we're chatting. When I am on the website, I can just literally click on the Chrome, the Google Keep extension, and it will just drop that link right into my notebook for me. I'm then able to add my own notes right within the window, but I could always come back and add to them later if that's what I want to do. So a quick tool, I think even if you're just trying to help kids curate some of the resources that they're exploring over time, it could be a quick tool to do just that. And that's Google Keep. Maybe if you, did you guys like that one? It's a quick tool, so just something in your back pocket, but I do feel like the other two give us a bit more option for setting that context. So Google Keep's great for that, that curating for ourselves, for sure, and keeping track of it all. I do love the search feature because it really needs, it really allows me to quickly sort through all of those notes and find what I'm looking for, which is always my problem. I don't have enough time to file it where I need to file it. Yeah, and Laura, that's the thing. There's so many of those Google tools out there that sometimes we miss out on some of those tools that can allow us to dive deeper. Okay, let's check out Wakelet. Is it really delayed for you guys? Am I going too fast? I do see the little yellow dots showing up when I am processing. Okay, I'll try to talk a little slower. It's just a few of us too, so hopefully it's okay. So with Wakelet, there is an app, but we're going to use the internet instead. So I'm just going to go to Safari. You do free accounts, which I love. Free is always awesome. So if you just go to wakelet.com, it will take you to the site. So definitely Wakelet's the place to go if we want to take those quick links from online, those tweets, any social media, even images. So it kind of has two parts which are interesting because I think it speaks again for that idea of going from curating for ourselves and curating for others. So you can add objects to your favorites or saved items at any time, but then you can put them together in a collection when you're ready to share them. So that's a little scary that it says I have 4,586 saved items. I've only been using it for 2 months, but that's okay. I do it a lot, I guess. So if I wanted to create a new collection, yeah, I may have a problem, Laura. So Laura, you can see there how they've been super cool with allowing us to import from Storify. So a lot of companies are being great about seeing those connections. So there's a lot of news companies using Wakelet, which is cool. Journalists. So again, coming into that literacy lens of seeing it from curation as a literacy is really cool. So let's create a new collection. Is there a topic anybody's doing, or maybe we'll just do, oh, I'm clicking on the wrong page. Clicking on my screen when I'm on the iPad. So once I'm in, I give my collection a title. So why don't we just call this our OTF curation session. So I can also give it a little description, and the description's handy just for those people that are checking it out. So this is a few items we chatted about. So as I go through, one of the other things I love is that I'm a visual learner, so having those visuals is key to me. So I can add a cover image, but I love that I don't have to find my own photos, so I can actually choose an image, and these are Creative Commons pictures. So they're pictures that we have access to. So we're going to just look for an art gallery. And this may not be a searched item to do in front of other people, so hopefully this works for us. Oh, there we go, the Louvre, just for us. There we go, perfect. Even what we're talking about. So now I love that they've even added those little features there so I can edit and really personalize this design. Now up in the top left-hand corner, you can see you can also create a background image. So again, if kids are using this to curate, or if we're using it to curate, we could use those images to help set the tone. So then down below, if I wanted to add in, I have a couple different pieces. I can use the A there to just add text. So getting ready for tonight. Notice that you can also put in links right above there as well as edit some of your text. So that we're allowed, that really allows us to kind of set the context again. And it's just there below. So as we go through your objects, we can use the arrows to move it up above other objects or move it down. So we'll be able to do that. Now, I love the fact that I can go to Twitter and I can go straight to me as a user, or to put a hashtag in, put a handle in if there's a conversation you're wanting to tap into. And it will actually let me look through that hashtag. I don't need to pull it all in. I'm actually able to then, just click on that plus sign and choose the tweets that I want to put in. I can even put them in reverse order. So if I put a call out, I can bring that back in. Laura, there is a Wakelet extension in Chrome. So as you're going along, you can add items, but you're adding items to your saved items. You would then have to add them to a collection after, I believe. I'd have to double check, but I think that's a piece. Wakelet's amazing. They're constantly adding more features. So the Twitter feed option was not there, I'd say 4 weeks ago. So they're great about taking user feedback, which is awesome. Now, if I had an online link, so let me just go get a link for Google Keep that we just talked about. So there's the website. So I can copy any of my websites. Select all and copy. And then I can just paste that link right on the link there that you see. So, hoping it doesn't make me look like a liar here. So there we go, paste. And it automatically will pull the image for me. I don't need to look for an image. And of course it's behind my Google account. So we can take that and then move it down and reorganize. So you really have that chance to put things where you want them to be and reorganize them to tell your story. So a couple other pieces. So we have a couple of our items. This isn't the most exciting curated collection, but you get the idea. So up in the top right-hand corner are our next buttons that are kind of ideal, as well as the button right below. This is a few items we chatted about. So you may see we have that option of media view. Notice that you have a couple other options. I'm going to just scroll this up so you can see it a bit better. So compact view would be more of a link. Think if students are doing research and you want them to curate 10 options, that compact view could be handy. The grid view is cool too because the grid view will actually take the objects and turn it into that grid. Cool if we're looking at artwork or images. Tweets always show the person's face though, so it's not as cool. So I find media view is my favorite. And then in the corner, I can choose who I'm curating for. So again, coming to those different users, I can either curate, this can be just for me, it can be a private piece. I can make it unlisted, which means it's only for the people that have the actual link. And I can also make it public so anybody can see it on my profile. So it just really allows us a chance to explore. So once I publish, it now becomes a collection that I can easily share. Nice, clean, crisp, and people can still interact with those tweets. They can interact with those links, and it even gives me the option here to notify, so I can tell people that are mentioned in my collection, or I can share. So I can copy that link and share it out on different social media platforms, just some different opportunities there. I love this feature too. I haven't played with it yet, but that fact that I can actually co-construct these curations together. So being able to add different contributors really changes the game. Thoughts, ideas? How do you think this could work for what you're wanting to do? So you guys are typing there, so I'll give you a second. I'm really liking it for our weekly recaps. Yeah, definitely, Jen. And that's what I feel with all of these tools. That's why I like them. Something like Google Keep, Wakelet, or Adobe Spark, we can each use them for ourselves. Jen, even putting a collection together, right, for around early societies with 3 or 4 artifacts we want them to explore. And once we get the handle of them, we could see which ones would fit our class better. Media analysis would be great, Laura. And revision. That's a cool idea. All right, just looking at the time, I always end up over talking. Sorry, folks. So let's take a quick look at Adobe Spark. So Adobe Spark actually has 3 tools. The one I use for curation would be Adobe Spark Page. And it is both an app, but remember it's also a website. And you can access all 3 tools through the website as well, which is great for students as they use different devices. The apps also are available on phones, which I know, Laura, for the high school crowd, kind of a big deal. Yeah, it'd be cool for them to kind of take notes. And to your point, Laura, they can actually drop in pictures straight to the curated collection. So they don't need to post them online. They can post them straight through the Wakelet app or the Wakelet site. All right, Adobe Spark Page. So we have a lot of different templates, a lot of different examples, which is nice. I can just push on the plus sign to make a new one. On the website, the symbols are going to be the same. They're just in different places. Good time for it to be sluggish for me. So hopefully it comes, it cooperates. Once we start our page, it's going to let us add different features in. All right, there we go. So it brings us up, again, just like Wakelet, we kind of have that title. I love that it looks super clean just to start off with. So we can put our info in there. And to start off, anytime we scroll down, we're going to look for that plus sign because that's where we can add information. So if I click on the plus sign there, I can go to Photos. What I also love is all of the options we have for photos. So as much as I can pull from my iPad or my device, I can take a picture right on the spot. Coming back to what we were talking about, free images is always cool, isn't it, Melanie? Even better, they source where the picture comes from. So it looks through Creative Commons pictures and then brings, credits them at the end of our resource. So Jan, for the grade 4s, as we're trying to teach them that, it's huge. So let's do Art Gallery here. The only downside to art galleries, of course, is that it's somebody else's pictures. So you always have to look with that eye. So we have this in, so that's cool. So now I'm going to put a title in. I'm just tapping on the text, and we're going to say curating for ourselves. Now, one of the cool things with text is, when you select, it just wants to pop up. When you're oh, there we go. They're up on the top for me. They moved my toolbar. So if you can see that up on the top of the page, you quickly can change what you're seeing. So curating for ourselves is really a heading. So I can just click on H1 and it will make it to the largest heading, or I can do it H2, which is a smaller heading. I can even turn it into a little bit of a quote. So I'm really quickly able to take that text and edit it and format it. Of course, I still have all those other options. So having students reflect on what just needs to be a reference, I just put it as a link, or what I feel needs to really be highlighted, so I want to create a button. So we talked about Google Keep. Hopefully it's still the link that we have here. So I can paste that in. So I don't want this to just be a word highlighted in my whole text. I want it to be a button that stands out. Now on top of that, we're able to bring in video. So with video, you're able to bring a link in from Vimeo, YouTube, or even create your own video in Adobe Spark Video. So when you were talking about media analysis, Laura, a great chance to bring in that media work and then bring in somebody's remix of that media work really quickly. The other piece we have is we have a lot of photo options. So one photo option is just to use photos, and again, we get all of those pieces we talked about earlier. The other thing that we can do is we can put a photo grid together. So instead of just putting in one photo, we could choose the 3 photographs we want to talk about and put them together as one collection. So now it's not just one picture taking over the whole page. We could put those 3 together side by side and put a caption in if we wanted to. The other one that they have there is a glide show, so it kind of creates a moving picture of sorts. So this one's a little different in that, let's see if I can show you here. Not patient. So it kind of glides through. So thinking if we're curating some of those favorite locations, to your point, Jen, about curating resources, and then one of the biggest features here is I can tap on the plus sign and I can actually annotate this piece. And I have all of my editing tools above. So we can say art, curation, like an art gallery. That's a terrible sentence, but hopefully it helps a little bit there. So now as I go through, I can put those annotations in. I could even have a picture in the background and have a video on top of it. So as I flow through my page now, I go from my title to my context and then can highlight those features that I want to highlight. Couple other pieces, just because I'm all about making it look pretty. So up in the top you have that little wand. That will give you your themes. So you can switch out your themes to help have that mood for what you're communicating. I have to say I love Crisp. It's usually the one I use. But sometimes as you're exploring, there's a different theme that helps tell your message better. The other thing you have your settings that you can kind of play with, and you have that play button. The play button just lets you preview it so you could see what others are seeing, and then you see those buttons there. It doesn't have the reorganization that Wakelet has where I can move things around. So it definitely is a tool for curating for others, really taking that collection and sharing it, packaging it. And that's why when I go to share, I have all of those sharing options. So I just have to choose a category. I can take credit or not. I can create that link and notice how the credits will actually give credit to those pictures that I used. So I find that's amazing, working on that whole attribution piece without a lot of extra stress. So that's the basics of Adobe Spark. Now I have a video on Google Keep and I have a small little tips and two on Adobe Spark page. So I'll make sure to email those to Trish tonight so that we can make sure they are included in the roundup, just if you want to go over them again. And remember, you can always email me and I can make a more detailed video to go over them. So maybe as we're looking at those tools, I'm just going to stop sharing. I see we only have a few more minutes left together. Tools. I'll stop sharing there. I'll go back to our presentation. Time always flies. I always think we have so much time and then we're always rushing at the end there. Sorry, guys. Which one of the tools do you feel you would explore? I think this is always the hard part when we look at digital tools, is we see so many aspects. It's always about picking that one. So if you had to choose one tool that you will try over the next 6 weeks that we have left this school year, what's the one that you think you'll dive into? Sorry, Laura. Hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming. I know, Melanie. That's the hard part, right? You're allowed to pick more than one, maybe two. But they definitely all have their features. So I think that regular practice definitely helps. Wakelet, Keep, and Sparks. I love your ideas, Laura, for the media analysis. I think it could be so cool for that. And Jan, your idea about the early societies is really cool. Yeah, I think that's kind of the cool thing about the tools too, is that we each find the one that works for us. And I probably have missed some that you guys have heard of or that others absolutely adore. So it's interesting how we each find those tools that work for us. Folks, I'm just going to go to the next page, if that's okay. Thank you guys so much. I know we were a small group, but hopefully you take away some new learning and some conversations. It's always great learning with you folks. Feel free to connect anytime. Tina Zita, Tina_Zita on Twitter. /Miss Zita is on Pinterest. And you can always email me as well. And some folks like Laura get to see me face to face. Thank you so much, guys. It was awesome chatting.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there. Absolutely. Oh, you're going to see someone on the 22nd.
We're doing outdoor learning in nature.
Oh,
so Laura and I will be at the marsh.
Take some photos.
We will.
Okay, I'm just going to stop the recording.